The morning light was pale and thin, the kind that made everything look washed out and tired. I had not slept much. I lay beside Mark, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, and I felt a strange calm settle over me. In my previous life, this was the morning I had broken down completely. I had called my mother, sobbing into the phone, and she had told me to be strong, to fight, that she knew I was a good person. But she had not known the full truth either. None of them did. Now I was the only one who knew the full shape of the trap, and that knowledge was the only weapon I had. Mark stirred and rolled over, his hand reaching out to touch my shoulder. He was playing his part well, the concerned husband trying to be supportive. If I did not know better, I would have been comforted. Did you sleep at all? He asked, his voice still thick with sleep. I slept, I said, which was not a lie. I had drifted in and out, my mind running through the details of what I needed to do. I have that meeting with Dennis at 9. I'll need to leave in about an hour. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. I can come with you if you want. If you need support. I almost laughed. The offer was so generous, so perfectly timed. In my previous life, I had taken him with me to meet with the lawyer, and he had managed to steer the conversation away from what I needed and toward what he thought I should do. He had made it sound like he was looking out for me, but I now understood he was just making sure I did not get too aggressive in my defense. I think I need to do this alone, I said, keeping my voice soft and vulnerable. It was not hard to sound weak. A part of me still felt weak, even with the knowledge of what was coming. I need to be able to think clearly, and if you're there, I'll just start worrying about you. He nodded, squeezing my shoulder. Okay, but call me when you're done. I want to know what he says. I agreed, and I got out of bed before he could say anything else. I went to the bathroom and closed the door, leaning against the sink. My reflection stared back at me. I looked older than I remembered, with dark circles under my eyes and a pinched look around my mouth. In my previous life, I had aged 10 years in the span of a few months. This time, I was determined not to let that happen. I showered and dressed in a simple blue blazer and tailored pants. I wanted to look professional but not aggressive, composed but not cold. I needed Dennis to see me as a victim, not a threat. At least for now. The drive to his office was familiar. I had been here before, in my other life. The building was a gray high-rise in the financial district, the lobby smelling of coffee and expensive cologne. I took the elevator to the 14th floor and walked into the reception area. A young woman with a tight bun and a polite smile asked me to wait. I sat in one of the leather chairs, flipping through a magazine I did not read. My thoughts were elsewhere. Dennis was a tall man with silver hair and a face that had seen many years of corporate battles. He had a calm, deliberate way of speaking that made you feel like he had all the time in the world for you, even when he did not. He gestured for me to sit in the chair across from his desk. I understand you're facing some serious accusations, he said, folding his hands on the desk. Mark gave me a brief overview. He seemed very concerned. Of course, Mark had called him first. He was setting the stage, controlling the narrative before I even had a chance to speak. I took a breath. Mark doesn't know the full story, I said carefully. The accusations are about data fabrication and leaking company secrets. Both of those things are false. But I think there's more going on than simple office politics. Dennis raised an eyebrow, his pen poised over a legal pad. What do you mean? I had rehearsed this in my head, but now that I was sitting here, I felt a tremor of fear. I was about to accuse my husband of trying to destroy me, and I had no concrete proof yet. But I had to start somewhere. I think someone is feeding the company false information, I said. And I think that person knows me well enough to make it look like I'm the one behind it. I think they have access to my work emails, my calendar, my personal files. This isn't just about a competitor or a jealous coworker. This is personal. Dennis leaned back in his chair, studying me. That's a serious claim, Elena. Do you have evidence? Not yet, I admitted. But I'm gathering it. I need your help to make sure that when I do have it, I can present it in a way that's legally airtight. I also need to protect my assets. If this goes to court, I need to be sure I won't lose everything. He nodded slowly. Smart. You're thinking ahead. That's good. Most people in your position are too emotional to plan. Emotional. That was what Mark was counting on. In my previous life, I had been emotional. I had screamed and cried and begged. I had given them all exactly what they expected of me. This time, I was going to be calm. I was going to be smart. Mark mentioned you were having some difficulties at home, Dennis added, his tone carefully neutral. He said you've been under a lot of stress lately, that your marriage has been strained. I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp, but I suppressed it. Mark was already planting seeds of doubt, making me sound unstable, unreliable. He was building his case against me in the court of public opinion, and Dennis was just the first juror. We've had our struggles, I said, choosing my words with care. But I'm not sure Mark understands the full extent of what's happening at the company. He's not in the office every day. He doesn't see the politics the way I do. Dennis wrote something down. All right. Here's what I need from you. I need a full list of everyone who had access to the Burnham account files. I need a timeline of when the discrepancies were flagged and who was involved in the investigation. And I need a detailed account of any personal conflicts you've had with colleagues in the past year. I nodded, pulling a notebook from my bag. I had prepared for this. I handed him a list I had written at 3 a.m, sitting at the kitchen table while Mark slept upstairs. It was a list of names, dates, and events. Rachel's name was at the top, but I had underlined 3 other names as well. They were people I suspected were part of the network, people who had benefited from my fall in my previous life. Dennis looked at the list, his eyes narrowing. This is very thorough. You must have been thinking about this all night. I couldn't sleep, I said, which was true. I kept going over the details, trying to make sense of it. There are too many coincidences for this to be a simple case of workplace rivalry. Someone planned this. He put the list down and looked at me with something like respect. I'll look into this. But Elena, I want to be upfront with you. Defending yourself against espionage accusations is expensive. And if you're planning to go after someone within the company, it's going to get even more complicated. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared, I said. Whatever it takes. When I left his office, I felt a small sense of accomplishment. I had planted the seed of doubt in Dennis's mind, and he had taken me seriously. That was more than I had managed in my previous life. But I knew this was just the beginning. I drove home slowly, letting my mind wander. The streets were familiar, the same cafes, the same intersections, the same sun-bleached awnings. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. I was living in a parallel version of my own life, and the only difference was what I knew. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Mark's car was gone. He had left a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to the gym. Back by lunch. Call me when you're home. The gym. He was probably at the clinic with Claire. I knew the doctor's appointment was scheduled for 10:30, which meant he was either sitting in the waiting room right now or he had just taken her out for coffee afterward. In my previous life, I had found out about the clinic because I had seen a receipt in his coat pocket. This time, I was going to see it with my own eyes. I grabbed my keys and drove to the address I had memorized. The clinic was in a strip mall on the other side of town, sandwiched between a pharmacy and a nail salon. The parking lot was half full. I pulled into a spot near the back and sat there, watching the entrance. It was not hard to spot them. They came out together, Claire's hand resting on her belly in a gesture that was almost unconscious. She was wearing a loose floral dress, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Mark was beside her, his hand on the small of her back. He was guiding her toward his car, his head bent toward hers, his face soft in a way I had not seen in years. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, the same pain I had felt in my previous life, but it was duller now. I had already grieved this loss. I had already spent years mourning the man I thought he was. Now I was just watching the confirmation of everything I already knew. They got into his car, and I watched them sit there for a moment, talking. Claire's head fell back against the seat, and she laughed at something he said. He reached over and touched her face. It was an intimate gesture, one that spoke of familiarity and comfort. He had been with her for months, maybe longer. I started my car and drove away. I did not need to see more. I had the evidence I needed, at least in my own mind. But I needed something tangible. Something I could show to Dennis or to a judge. A photo would not be enough. It would just look like the desperate accusation of a jealous wife. When I got home, I went straight to the garage. I opened the gym bag again and pulled out the phone. I scrolled through his messages quickly, taking photos of the screen with my own phone. There were dozens of them. Plans to meet, declarations of love, discussions about the future. He was planning to leave me. He was just waiting for the right moment, for when I was so broken by the company scandal that a divorce would be seen as an act of mercy. I put the phone back and went inside. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands shaking slightly. I had the photos now, but I could not use them yet. If I exposed him too early, he would just deny it. He would say I had fabricated the evidence, that I was unstable. I needed to wait. I needed to catch him in a moment where he could not talk his way out of it. The phone buzzed. A text from Mark. How did the meeting go? I'm heading home. Wanna grab lunch? I typed back a response that was breezy light. It went well. He thinks I have a good case. I'll tell you more when you get here. I knew exactly what he would do. He would sit across from me at lunch, looking concerned, and he would ask me a million questions. He would try to pry into what Dennis and I had discussed, trying to gauge how much of a threat I was. And I would give him just enough to keep him calm. I would let him think I was still the same Elena, the one who trusted him, the one who needed him. He came through the door an hour later, carrying a bag from the deli down the street. He kissed my cheek and set the bag on the counter. I got you a turkey sandwich. Extra pickles. I know you like that. Thank you, I said, smiling. It was such a small, thoughtful gesture. In my previous life, I would have been touched by it. Now I just saw it for what it was, a performance. He was playing the role of the good husband, keeping me close, keeping me confused. How was the gym? I asked, taking the sandwich out of the bag. Good, he said. Worked up a sweat. I feel better. I believed him. He probably did feel better. He had just spent the morning with his pregnant girlfriend, and now he was coming home to the wife he was about to destroy. It was a balancing act, and he was good at it. I'm going to need to go back to the office tomorrow, I said, taking a bite of my sandwich. I have to pick up some personal files. Dennis said I should get copies of everything before the company locks me out. Mark frowned. I don't know if that's a good idea. What if they think you're trying to cover something up? Then they'll think that anyway, I said. But I need my records. My performance reviews, my emails, my project notes. If I have them, I can prove I was doing my job properly. It's the only way I can clear my name. He was quiet for a moment, considering. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was trying to figure out how to stop me without looking like he was trying to stop me. Let me come with you, he said finally. I can help you carry the boxes. And if anyone gives you trouble, I'll be there to back you up. It was the same offer he had made in my previous life. I had taken him up on it, and he had managed to distract me, to slow me down, to make me leave half the files behind. He had made sure I did not have the evidence I needed. Okay, I said, nodding. That's nice of you. I'd appreciate the help. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that used to make my heart flutter. Now it just made me feel cold. I knew exactly what he was planning, but he did not know what I was planning. And that was the only advantage I had. The office building looked exactly as it had in my memory. The same polished granite floors, the same security desk with the same sleepy guard named Frank who always gave me a nod when I walked in. But this time, when I walked past him with Mark at my side, I felt like a stranger in my own workplace. Frank looked at me differently, a flicker of something uncomfortable in his eyes. He knew. Everyone knew. Mark kept his hand on my elbow, guiding me toward the elevator. Just act normal, he murmured. Don't look like you're hiding anything. I'm not hiding anything, I said, keeping my voice even. I'm picking up my personal property. That's all. The elevator ride was quiet. Mark stood beside me, his posture relaxed, almost casual. He was good at this. He had always been good at appearing calm in the middle of a storm. I had admired that about him once. Now I just saw it for what it was, a mask. We stepped out onto the 5th floor. The open plan office was buzzing with low conversation and the click of keyboards. A few heads turned as I walked in. I saw Rachel at her desk near the window, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked up, and our eyes met for just a moment. She looked away first. I went straight to my cubicle. It had already been stripped. My personal photos were gone. My plant was gone. My favorite mug was gone. Everything that made it mine had been cleared away. The only things left were the company-issued computer and a stack of empty file folders. Where are my things? I asked, turning to Mark. My photos. My daughter's drawing. Mark shrugged. They probably boxed them up. Standard procedure. You can ask HR about it. I knew that was a lie. In my previous life, I had asked HR about my things, and they had told me they were lost. I never got them back. But this time, I had come prepared. I had already photographed everything in my cubicle the week before, just in case. I had backup. I opened the filing cabinet next to my desk. It was empty. The drawer where I had kept my project notes was bare. I closed it and opened the drawer below. Nothing. They had removed everything. See, Mark said, his voice soft and apologetic. I told you they'd clean it out. We should just go. I turned to face him. I'm not leaving until I get my files. I have copies on the shared drive. I'm going to print them. His face tightened almost imperceptibly. Elena, you're on administrative leave. You're not supposed to access the system. I'm not accessing the system. I'm printing documents that belong to me. I wrote them. They're my work. I walked past him toward the printer station in the corner. I could feel his eyes on my back, but I didn't turn around. I logged into the printer using my personal code, which still worked. I navigated to the shared drive and found the folder I had hidden months ago, a folder with my name and a date stamp that looked like an old backup. Inside were copies of every project report I had ever written, every email thread with clients, every performance review. I hit print, and the machine whirred to life. Mark appeared at my side. What are you doing printing my records? I told you. That's a lot of paper. People are going to notice. Let them notice. The printer spat out page after page. I could hear the low murmur of voices around me, people whispering, watching. Rachel had stood up from her desk and was walking toward us. Her heels clicked against the floor like a slow drumbeat. Elena, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I didn't expect to see you here. I'm sorry about everything that's happened. She didn't look sorry. She looked like a cat who had just eaten a canary and was still licking her whiskers. I had known Rachel for 8 years. We had started at the firm around the same time. We had been friends, or so I had thought. She had been the one who introduced me to Mark at a company party. She had been the one who threw me a baby shower when my daughter was born. She had been the one I trusted with my secrets, my fears, my doubts. And she had been the one who sold them all to the highest bidder. Don't be sorry, Rachel, I said, not looking up from the printer. I'm sure you're very happy about how this turned out. She laughed, a thin, brittle sound. That's not fair. I've been trying to help you. I told them you didn't mean any harm, that you were just stressed. I vouched for you. Did you also vouch for the person who fed them the false information? I asked, finally meeting her eyes. Her smile flickered. I don't know what you're talking about. Mark stepped between us, putting a hand on my shoulder. Let's not do this here, Elena. This isn't the time. I shook him off. Actually, this is exactly the time. Rachel, I know you were involved. I know you told them I fabricated those reports. And I know you didn't do it alone. Rachel's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. That's a very serious accusation. You have no proof. I have more than you think, I said. I've been keeping records for a long time. I have copies of every email you sent me, every conversation we had. I have notes from every meeting we attended together. I know exactly when you started talking to the people who wanted to take me down. It was a bluff. I didn't have all those records. Not yet. But I had enough to make her nervous. I watched her eyes dart to Mark, then back to me. You're paranoid, Elena, she said. You're losing it. Everyone can see it. Maybe I am, I agreed, pulling the last page from the printer. But I'm not so paranoid that I can't tell when someone is lying to my face. You're a liar, Rachel. And you're a coward. You're hiding behind someone else's plan because you're too afraid to do it on your own. I grabbed the stack of papers and walked toward the exit. Mark hurried after me, his hand on my arm. That was a mistake. You just made an enemy. She was always my enemy, I said. I just didn't know it until now. We got into the elevator, and the doors slid closed. Mark was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out how to spin what had just happened. He was probably already composing the message he would send to HR, warning them that I was unstable, that I was making threats. You need to be careful, he said finally. Rachel is well liked. If you go after her, people are going to side with her. People already side with her, I said. That's the whole point. She made sure of that. I didn't say anything else. I just stood there, holding my stack of papers, watching the floor numbers tick down. When the doors opened, I walked out without looking back. I didn't wait for Mark. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. I didn't go home. I drove to a coffee shop on the other side of town, a place I had never been before. I ordered a black coffee and sat in a corner booth, spreading the papers out in front of me. I had printed more than just project files. I had printed emails, calendar entries, and a log of every time Rachel had accessed the shared drive. I had printed a record of every meeting Mark had scheduled outside of work hours, the ones he had told me were business dinners. I had built a case over the past few days, piece by piece, using only what I remembered and what I could access. It was a fragile case, built on memory and speculation, but it was growing. I just needed one more piece. One piece that would tie it all together. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know what you're doing. You're making a mistake. I stared at the screen. My heart started to pound. Who is this Mark? Rachel? Someone else entirely. I typed back. Who is this? The response came quickly. Someone who wants to help you. But you have to stop pushing. You're going to make things worse. I felt a chill run down my spine. This was not part of my previous life. This was new. Someone else was paying attention, someone I had not anticipated. I typed again. I don't know who you are. If you want to help, tell me who you are. No response. I waited 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. I put the phone down and stared at the papers in front of me. Someone was watching me. Someone knew what I was doing. That meant I was on the right track. I packed up my papers and left the coffee shop. I needed to go home. I needed to be careful. If someone was watching me, then someone was also watching Mark. That was a complication I had not expected. When I got home, the house was empty. Mark's car was not in the driveway. I went inside and checked my messages. A text from him. Had to go back to the office. Rachel called. She's worried about you. She said you threatened her. I laughed out loud. Of course she had. She was already building her case against me, making me look like the unstable one. I typed back. I didn't threaten her. I told her the truth. There's a difference. I went upstairs and changed into comfortable clothes. I sat on the bed and looked at the stack of papers beside me. I had more evidence than I had in my previous life, but it still wasn't enough. I needed Mark to slip up. I needed him to show his hand. I remembered the phone in the gym bag. I had taken photos of the messages, but I hadn't looked at all of them. I went back to the garage and pulled out the phone again. I scrolled through the conversations, looking for something specific. I found it in a series of texts from 3 weeks ago. Mark and Claire were discussing a meeting. He was telling her he was going to be late because he had to deal with the Burnham situation. He had said that he had someone in place to make sure the blame fell in the right direction. I took photos of those texts too. It was vague, but it was something. It showed that Mark knew about the Burnham account, that he had been involved in some way. It wasn't proof of the affair, but it was proof that he had been communicating with someone about the company issue. I put the phone back and went inside. I sat at the kitchen table and started organizing my evidence. I had printed copies of everything, and I had digital copies on a secure drive. I had photos of Mark's phone. I had a list of dates and times. I had a timeline of events that showed exactly when the accusations had started to surface. But I still felt like I was missing something. In my previous life, I had found out about Claire because Mark had left a receipt in his coat pocket. I had confronted him, and he had admitted everything. But this time, I needed him to admit it in a way that was public, in a way that could be used against him. I needed him to confess in front of witnesses. The front door opened. Mark's voice called out from the hallway. Elena, I'm back. I gathered my papers and shoved them into a drawer. I stood up and walked to the kitchen doorway. Mark was standing there, his face flushed. He looked upset, but I couldn't tell if it was genuine or part of his act. Rachel called me again, he said. She said you made a scene in the office. She said people are talking. Let them talk, I said. I didn't do anything wrong. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know you're angry. I know this is hard. But you need to calm down. You're making it worse for yourself. I'm not making it worse, I said. I'm defending myself. There's a difference. He walked closer, his hands out, like he was trying to soothe a wild animal. Elena, listen to me. I'm on your side. I've always been on your side. But you have to trust me. You have to let me help you. I looked at him, into his eyes, and I felt a wave of sadness. He was so good at this. He could look at me with such sincerity, such care. If I didn't know the truth, I would have believed him. I would have fallen for it all over again. I trust you, Mark, I said, and the lie tasted like ash in my mouth. I just don't trust them. But I'll try to be more careful. He smiled, relief flooding his face. That's all I ask. We'll get through this. Together. He leaned in and kissed my forehead. I stood there, frozen, letting him perform his part. I knew what I had to do next. I had to keep playing along, keep pretending, until I had everything I needed. And then I would show him exactly what it meant to try to destroy someone who refused to be destroyed. The next few days settled into a strange rhythm. I went through the motions of my old life, while building a new one underneath it, like a house being rebuilt while the family still slept inside. Mark continued his careful performance, coming home on time, asking about my day, offering to cook dinner. He was so attentive that I almost felt guilty for what I was planning. I started meeting with Dennis more frequently. We met in his office, in coffee shops, once in a park bench near his building. He was cautious, always glancing around to see if anyone was watching us. I told him about the texts, about the affair, about my suspicions. He listened without judgment, taking notes in his careful handwriting. You have enough for a divorce case, he said during our third meeting. You have proof of infidelity. You have evidence that he's been communicating with someone about the company. But if you want to clear your name at work, you need something that directly ties him to the accusations. I know, I said. I'm working on it. I had been doing more than just working on it. I had been watching Mark. I had been tracking his movements, his phone calls, his emails. I had installed a small recording app on his laptop, one that captured keystrokes and screenshots. It was a risk, but I needed to know what he was telling Rachel and the others. The app gave me access to his messages. He and Rachel were in constant communication, sometimes several times a day. They talked about me, about the company, about the plan. Mark was the one giving Rachel instructions, telling her what to say, what to do, who to talk to. She was his pawn, and she didn't even know it. I found an email from Mark to Rachel that made my blood run cold. It was dated 3 weeks before the accusations had surfaced. In it, Mark wrote, "If Elena starts asking questions about the Burnham account, tell her it was a routine audit. Don't let her get too close to the numbers. She's smart, and she'll figure it out." Rachel had replied, "Don't worry. I'll keep her distracted." I took screenshots of everything. I saved them to a secure drive, one that Mark didn't know about. I had enough now to show that Mark and Rachel had been conspiring together, but I still needed to prove why. I needed to show the motive, the thing that would make a jury or a board understand why he would do this to his own wife. The answer was sitting in a folder on his desk, a folder I had found while he was in the shower. Inside was a financial statement from a property developer. Mark had been planning to invest in a new housing development, one that required a significant amount of capital. He had been using our joint savings to fund it, and he had been doing it without my knowledge. If I left him, I would take half of everything, and he couldn't afford to lose that money. He needed me gone, but he needed me gone in a way that made me the bad guy, the one who had cost him everything. I put the folder back and went downstairs. Mark was in the kitchen, making coffee. He looked up and smiled. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Not really," I said. "Too much on my mind." He walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "I know this is hard, but it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I had been so focused on the revenge, on the plan, that I had forgotten how much this hurt. This man had been my partner for over a decade. We had built a life together. We had a daughter, a home, a history. And he was throwing it all away for a piece of land and a woman who was carrying his child. That afternoon, I drove to my daughter's school. Emma was 12, with my dark hair and Mark's cautious eyes. She was in her second year of middle school, and she was already starting to pull away from us, retreating into the world of friends and homework and music. In my previous life, I had lost her too. Mark had turned her against me, telling her that I had been the one who destroyed our family, that I had been the one who was unfaithful. She had believed him, and I had spent my final years alone, watching her grow up from a distance. I waited for her at the school gate. When she came out, she looked surprised to see me. "Mom, what are you doing here? I thought we could get ice cream," I said. "Just the two of us." She hesitated, glancing at her friends, but she nodded. "Okay." We walked to the ice cream shop around the corner. We sat at a small table by the window, and I watched her eat her chocolate cone. She was so young, so full of promise. In my previous life, I had let her slip away, too consumed by my own pain to fight for her. I was not going to make that mistake again. "Are you okay, Mom?" she asked. "You look sad." "I'm okay," I said. "I've just been thinking a lot about things. About family. About what's important." She looked at me with those cautious eyes. "Is it true what people are saying that you might lose your job?" I felt a flash of anger. "Who had been talking to her?" "Mark, Rachel, someone at school." "Who told you that?" "I heard it from some kids," she said. "They said their parents were talking about it." "Is it true?" I took a deep breath. I had promised myself I would be honest with her, but I didn't want to burden her with the full weight of what was happening. "There have been some problems at my work, but I'm trying to fix them. I'm going to be okay." She nodded, accepting my answer. But I could see the worry in her eyes, the same worry I had seen in my previous life. I reached across the table and took her hand. "Emma, no matter what happens, I want you to know that I love you. And I will always fight for you. I'm going to make sure that nothing takes me away from you." She squeezed my hand, and for a moment, I felt like I had already won something. She was still here. She was still mine. When I got home, Mark was on the phone in the living room. He was speaking in a low voice, and he stopped when I walked in. He covered the receiver with his hand. "Just work stuff," he said. "I'll be off in a minute." I nodded and went into the kitchen. I didn't believe him. I knew who he was talking to. I could see the outline of his other phone in his pocket, the one he used for Claire. He was probably telling her that he had to be careful, that I was getting suspicious. I started making dinner, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. I was thinking about the next step. I needed to force Mark's hand, to make him reveal himself in a way that couldn't be denied. I had been passive for too long, letting him control the narrative. It was time to take control. I had an idea. It was risky, but it might work. I walked into the living room. Mark was off the phone now, scrolling through his phone. I sat down across from him. "I've been thinking," I said, "about the accusations at work. I think I should go public. Write a statement, tell my side of the story. I think it's the only way to clear my name." Mark looked up, alarm flickering across his face. "That's a terrible idea. You'll just make things worse. You'll give them more ammunition." "Maybe," I said. "But I'm tired of being silent. I'm tired of letting people talk about me behind my back. I want to fight back." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to that careful, soothing tone he used when he was trying to calm me down. "Elena, listen to me. If you go public, you'll be giving up any chance of a settlement. The company will close ranks and you'll be out on the street. You'll lose everything." "I've already lost everything," I said. "I've lost my job. I've lost my reputation. I've lost my friends. What do I have left to lose?" He was quiet for a moment. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how to handle me. I was not behaving the way he expected. I was not crying. I was not begging. I was talking about fighting back, and that scared him. "Please," he said finally. "Just wait. Give me a chance to fix this. I'll talk to people. I'll make some calls. I'll find a way to get you reinstated." I looked at him, really looked at him. His face was drawn, his eyes pleading. He was a good actor. He almost made me believe him. But I knew what was underneath. I knew about Claire. I knew about the money. I knew about the plan. "Okay," I said. "I'll wait. but not forever. He nodded, relief washing over his face. He stood up and walked over to me, pulling me into a hug. I let him hold me, my arms limp at my sides. He was so close that I could smell his cologne, the same cologne he had worn for years. It used to be a comfort to me. Now it just smelled like lies. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Mark's breathing. I had a decision to make. I could wait for him to make a mistake, to reveal himself. Or I could force his hand, make him react in a way that would expose everything that I knew what I had to do. I had been holding back, protecting myself, afraid of what might happen. But I was done being afraid. I was done being the victim. It was time to become the person who told the story, not the person who had to listen to it. I got up quietly and went to my study. I pulled out my laptop and started typing. I wrote a letter to the board of directors, detailing everything I had found. I wrote about the Burnham account, about the fake reports, about Rachel's involvement. I wrote about Mark's secret messages, his affair, his plans to leave me. I wrote about the financial documents I had found, the ones that showed he was stealing from our joint savings. I was not going to send it. Not yet. But I was going to let Mark find it. I was going to plant it on his desk, in a folder that looked like it was meant for his eyes. I was going to let him see that I knew everything, that I had all the evidence, that he was not as clever as he thought he was. He would panic. He would react. And in his panic, he would make a mistake. I printed the letter and put it in a folder. I took it to his study and placed it on his desk, between two stacks of papers. It was obvious enough that he would see it, but not so obvious that it looked planted. Then I went back to bed and lay down beside him, closing my eyes. I didn't know what he would do when he saw the letter. But I knew that whatever it was, it would be the beginning of the end. I woke to the sound of Mark's voice, low and sharp, coming from downstairs. It was barely 6 in the morning, and the light was still gray outside. I lay still for a moment, listening. He was on the phone, and he was not trying to be quiet. "I told you to be careful," he was saying. "She's not stupid. She's been putting things together." There was a pause. I could hear the murmur of a voice on the other end, but I couldn't make out the words. I crept to the edge of the bed and leaned closer to the door. "No, I haven't told her anything," Mark continued. "But she found something. A letter. She wrote a letter to the board. It has everything. The Burnham account, Rachel, the money. She knows." Another pause. Then his voice again, harder this time. "I don't care what you have to do. Fix it. Make sure that letter never gets to anyone. If it does, we're both finished." He hung up, and I heard him pacing in the kitchen. I slipped back into bed and closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep. My heart was pounding, but I forced my breathing to stay slow and even. He had found the letter. Good. A few minutes later, I heard his footsteps on the stairs. The door creaked open, and I felt his eyes on me. I kept my breathing steady, my face relaxed. He stood there for a long moment, and I could almost feel him deciding what to do. Then the door closed, and he went back downstairs. I waited another 10 minutes before getting up. I took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the tension in my shoulders. I had set the trap, and he had taken the bait. Now I just had to see what he would do next. When I came downstairs, Mark was in the kitchen. He had made coffee and toast, and he was setting the table like it was a normal morning. He looked up when I walked in, his face carefully neutral. "Morning," he said. "I made breakfast." "Thanks," I said, sitting down at the table. He sat across from me, and we ate in silence. I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out how to approach me. He was probably rehearsing the conversation he wanted to have, the one where he convinced me to stay quiet, to trust him, to give him more time. He cleared his throat. "I want to talk to you about something." I looked up from my toast. "What about?" He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out the letter I had written and placed it on the table between us. "I found this on my desk. Care to explain?" I looked at the letter, then back at him. "It's exactly what it looks like. I wrote it. I was planning to send it to the board." His jaw tightened. "Elena, you can't do this. This would destroy everything. Our marriage. Our family. My career." "Your career," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. What about my career? What about what they did to me? He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. I know this is hard, but you have to trust me. I can fix this. I can make it all go away. But only if you let me. I looked at him, and I felt a strange sense of calm. He was so desperate, so afraid. He had spent years building this house of cards, and now he could see it starting to wobble. But he still thought he could control it. He still thought I would be the one to save him. You say you can fix it, I said. But you haven't fixed anything yet. You told me to wait, and I waited. Now it's your turn to prove that you can actually do something. He nodded slowly. I know. And I will. But I need time. I need you to not send that letter. Not yet. Give me a week. I'll talk to the board. I'll get Rachel to recant. I'll make sure they know the truth. I took a sip of my coffee, letting him sweat. A week. That's all you're getting. After that, I send the letter. He agreed, and we finished breakfast in silence. I could tell he was already planning his next move, trying to figure out how to neutralize me without making things worse. I had given him a deadline, and he was going to use it to try to win me back, to convince me to give up. But I was not going to give up. I was just buying time. I spent the rest of the day going through my evidence, organizing it, making sure everything was in order. I had copies of everything stored in 3 different places: a secure drive, a safety deposit box at the bank, and a folder I had given to Dennis. I was ready for whatever came next. That evening, Mark came home late. He looked tired, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed. He walked into the living room and collapsed on the couch, rubbing his face with his hands. I talked to Rachel, he said. She's willing to recant. She's going to tell the board that she made a mistake, that she misinterpreted the data. They're going to drop the investigation. I sat down across from him, watching his face carefully. And what did she want in return? He looked up, a flash of surprise in his eyes. What do you mean? I mean, she didn't just agree to do it for free. What did you promise her? He was quiet for a moment, then sighed. I promised her a promotion. A raise. A transfer to a different department. I nodded slowly. It made sense. Rachel had always been ambitious, always looking for the next step up. She had been willing to destroy me to get ahead, and now she was willing to betray Mark to get what she wanted. She was a survivor, and survivors did what they had to do. You trust her? I asked. You think she's actually going to follow through? She has no choice, he said. If she doesn't, I'll expose everything. I have evidence too. I've been keeping records of our conversations, the things she said about you. I can bury her if I have to. He was showing me his cards, trying to prove that he was on my side. But I knew him too well. He was just trying to stay one step ahead, to make sure I didn't have any reason to go after him. He was protecting himself, not me. Okay, I said. I'll wait. But Mark, if this doesn't work, I'm not going to give you another chance. You have 1 week to fix this. 1 week. He nodded, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He was trapped in a web of his own making, and he was running out of ways to escape. The next few days were a blur of activity. I kept up my end of the bargain, staying quiet, waiting for Mark to make things right. But I also kept watching, kept listening. I had installed a small recorder in his study, and I had been monitoring his calls. I knew exactly what he was doing, who he was talking to, and what he was planning. On the 5th day, I heard a conversation that changed everything. Mark was on the phone with someone I didn't recognize, a man with a deep voice and a measured tone. She's not going to back down, Mark was saying. She's got too much evidence. I need you to make sure that letter never reaches the board. The man on the other end laughed. You're asking me to break the law, Mark. I'm asking you to do what you do best. I'll pay you double what we agreed. Just make sure she's out of the picture. My blood ran cold. He was not just trying to discredit me anymore. He was trying to make me disappear. He had crossed a line, and there was no going back. I stopped the recording and saved it. I had him now. Not just for infidelity, not just for financial fraud, but for conspiracy. He had threatened me, and I had it all on tape. I called Dennis and told him what I had heard. He was quiet for a long moment. This is serious, Elena. You need to go to the police. You need to file a report. I know, I said. But I need to be careful. If I go to the police now, he'll just deny it. I need to catch him in the act. Don't do anything reckless, Dennis warned. He's already shown you what he's capable of. You need to be safe. I assured him I would be careful, but I was already planning my next move. I was going to confront Mark, but I was going to do it in a place where there were witnesses. I was going to force him to admit everything, and I was going to have it all recorded. That night, I made dinner. I set the table with candles and wine, like it was a special occasion. Mark came home and looked at the spread with surprise. What's all this? He asked. I thought we could have a nice evening, I said. Just the two of us. No work, no stress. Just dinner. He smiled, but I could see the wariness in his eyes. He knew something was off, but he couldn't figure out what. He sat down, and we ate in silence. I waited until we were almost finished before I spoke. I know about Claire, I said. He froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. What? I know about Claire. I know about the baby. I know about the plans you've been making. He put down his fork and looked at me. His face was pale, but he was trying to stay calm. Elena, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Mark. I have evidence. I have photos of the two of you at the clinic. I have copies of your texts. I have recordings of your phone calls. I know everything. He was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. It was not a warm smile. It was cold, calculating. Okay, he said. You caught me. I'm having an affair. But you have no idea what you're dealing with. You think you're so clever, but you're just making things worse for yourself. I stood up, my heart pounding. What is that supposed to mean? It means, he said, that I've already talked to the board. I've already told them about the Burnham account. I've already made sure that you're going to be the one who takes the fall. You can have all the evidence you want. It's not going to matter. Because by the time you get to use it, you're going to be in so much trouble that no one will believe you. I felt a chill run down my spine. He was right. He had been working behind my back, making sure that I was the one who was going to be blamed for everything. He had planned it all out, and he had made sure that I had no way to escape. But he had made one mistake. He had underestimated me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I held it up so he could see the screen. It was recording. I have everything, I said. Every word you just said. Every threat. Every lie. And I'm not going to let you destroy me, Mark. I'm going to destroy you. His face went white. He lunged for the phone, but I was faster. I stepped back and held it out of his reach. It's too late, I said. I've already sent a copy to Dennis. I've already sent a copy to the board. I've already sent a copy to the police. He stopped, his hands shaking. He looked at me with a mixture of rage and fear, and for a moment, I felt a surge of triumph. I had won. I had finally, truly won. Then the doorbell rang. I walked to the door and opened it. 2 police officers stood on the porch, their faces impassive. Elena Davis, one of them asked. Yes, I said. We have a warrant for your arrest. You're being charged with corporate espionage. The world tilted sideways. I stood in the doorway, my hand still gripping the phone, and I could not make sense of what the officer had just said. Corporate espionage. The words hung in the air like a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I'm sorry, I managed to say. There must be a mistake. The officer, a woman with a tired face and steady eyes, looked at me without expression. Ma'am, I need you to step outside. We have a warrant for your arrest and a search warrant for the premises. Mark appeared behind me, his face a careful mask of shock and concern. What's going on, Elena? What did you do? I turned to look at him, and I saw the faintest flicker of triumph in his eyes before he suppressed it. He had done this. He had called them. He had set me up to take the fall for everything, and he had done it while I was busy congratulating myself on my cleverness. I didn't do anything, I said, my voice shaking. I've been trying to clear my name. I have evidence. I have recordings. The officer held up a hand. You'll have a chance to present your evidence in court. Right now, I need you to come with us. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Mark, his grip firm but gentle. I'll call Dennis, he said. I'll get you a lawyer. Just go with them. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that he was the one who had done this, that he was the one who had been conspiring against me, that he was the one who had threatened me. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Not now. Not here. I walked out of the house and into the back of the police car. The door closed with a solid thunk, and I was alone with my thoughts. I stared out the window as the car pulled away, watching my house grow smaller in the distance. Mark stood on the porch, his phone already pressed to his ear. He was probably calling Rachel. He was probably calling his lawyer. He was making sure that everything went according to plan. The police station was a gray building with fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered. They took my fingerprints, my photograph, my personal belongings. I was put in a small room with a table and 2 chairs, and I sat there for what felt like hours, waiting. When Dennis finally arrived, he looked grave. He sat down across from me and placed a folder on the table. Elena, what happened? He asked. I got a call from the DA's office. They're charging you with corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets. I didn't do anything, I said, my voice hoarse. Mark set me up. He's been planning this for months. I have evidence. I showed you the recordings. Dennis nodded slowly. I know. I have copies of everything you gave me. But the DA has evidence too. They have emails from your company account that show you sending sensitive information to a competitor. They have records of large deposits into a personal account that matches the dates of those emails. They have a witness who is willing to testify that they saw you accessing confidential files. A witness. I knew exactly who that witness was. Rachel, I said. It was Rachel, wasn't it? Dennis didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. It doesn't matter who the witness is right now. What matters is that the evidence against you is substantial. They have a case, Elena. A strong one. I felt the walls closing in around me. In my previous life, I had been too broken to fight. I had accepted the accusations, and I had let myself be destroyed. But this time, I had evidence. I had the truth. I just had to find a way to make people listen. I need to talk to the DA, I said. I need to tell them what I know. Dennis shook his head. That's not how this works. You're going to have to wait for your arraignment. In the meantime, I'm going to file a motion to suppress the evidence. I'm going to argue that it was obtained illegally. But I need you to be patient. This is going to take time. Time. I didn't have time. Mark was out there, free, destroying my life piece by piece. He was probably already talking to Emma, telling her that I had been arrested, that I had done something terrible, that I was not the person she thought I was. I could feel my daughter slipping away from me, just like she had in my previous life. I need to see my daughter, I said. I need to talk to her. Dennis's face softened. I'll see what I can do. But for now, you need to focus on your defense. We have a lot of work to do. They put me in a holding cell. It was small and cold, with a metal bench and a thin mattress. I sat on the bench, hugging my knees to my chest, and I tried to think. I had been so careful. I had planned everything so carefully. But Mark had been one step ahead of me the entire time. He had anticipated my moves, and he had countered them before I even made them. I thought about the phone in my pocket, the one I had been using to record him. They had taken it when I was arrested. They probably had it in evidence now. But I had copies of everything. I had sent them to Dennis. I had sent them to the board. I had sent them to the police. Or I had told Mark I had sent them, but in the chaos of the moment, I had not actually done it. I had been bluffing, trying to scare him, and he had called my bluff. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. I had been so close. I had been so sure I was going to win. And now I was sitting in a jail cell, facing charges that could send me to prison for years. The hours passed. I drifted in and out of sleep, my mind replaying everything that had happened. I thought about Emma. I thought about Mark. I thought about Claire and the baby. I thought about all the years I had wasted, all the trust one had given, all the love I had poured into a man who had never deserved it. When Dennis came back, he looked different. There was something in his eyes, a glimmer of hope that had not been there before. I found something, he said, sitting down across from me. I was going through the evidence the DA provided, and I noticed something unusual. The emails they're using as evidence against you, the ones you supposedly sent to the competitor, they were sent from your account, but the IP address doesn't match your usual location. Someone else sent those emails. Someone who had access to your login information. My heart leaped. Mark had access to my account. He knew my password. He used to log into my computer all the time to check my schedule, to see if I was available for dinner. Dennis nodded. I'm going to subpoena the server logs. If I can prove that those emails were sent from a different location, from a device that wasn't yours, I can cast doubt on the entire case. But I need you to be patient. This is going to take time. Time. It always came back to time. But this time, I was not going to let it slip away. I was going to fight. I was going to prove my innocence, no matter how long it took. The next day, I was brought to the courthouse for my arraignment. The courtroom was packed with reporters, their cameras flashing as I walked in. I kept my head high, my eyes straight ahead. I could see Mark in the front row, sitting next to Rachel. He looked composed, his face a mask of concern. Rachel looked smug. She was wearing a new dress, and she was sitting just a little too close to Mark. The judge read the charges against me. I pleaded not guilty. The DA requested that I be held without bail, arguing that I was a flight risk. Dennis argued that I was a longtime resident of the community, with no prior criminal record, and that I had strong ties to my family and my daughter. The judge set bail at $100,000. It was more than I could afford. I had savings, but Mark had control of most of our accounts. I was effectively trapped. As I was being led out of the courtroom, I saw Emma in the back row. She was sitting with my mother, her face pale and tear-streaked. She looked at me, and I could see the confusion in her eyes. She didn't understand what was happening. She didn't understand why her mother was being led away in handcuffs. Emma, I called out, but the guards pulled me away. I saw my mother put an arm around Emma, pulling her close. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and anger, and I knew what she was thinking. She had never approved of Mark. She had told me he was too smooth, too charming, too good to be true. I had ignored her warnings, and now I was paying the price. Back in my cell, I sat on the bench and stared at the wall. I thought about everything I had lost. My job, my reputation, my freedom, my daughter, my marriage. It was all slipping away, just like it had in my previous life. But this time, I was not going to let it go without a fight. I had evidence. I had recordings. I had the truth. I just needed to find a way to use it. Dennis came to see me that evening. He looked tired, but there was a spark of determination in his eyes. I talked to the DA, he said. I told them about the IP address discrepancy. They're going to investigate. It's going to take a few days, but they're taking it seriously. How did they react? I asked. They were skeptical at first, he admitted. But I showed them the evidence. They're going to take a closer look at the source of those emails. If they find that they were sent from a different location, they might drop the charges. I felt a flicker of hope. It was small, but it was there. And Mark, what about Mark? Dennis shook his head. That's going to be harder. He's not under investigation. Not yet. But if we can prove that the emails were sent from his device, we can bring him in for questioning. It's a long shot, but it's possible. I nodded. I had been running on adrenaline and anger for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to have hope. But now, sitting in this cold cell, I allowed myself to believe that I might actually be able to escape this. I also talked to your mother, Dennis said. She's going to pay your bail. You'll be out tomorrow. I felt tears prick at my eyes. My mother. The woman I had pushed away, the woman I had ignored for years. She had not given up on me. She was still fighting for me, even when I had stopped fighting for myself. Thank you, I whispered. Dennis reached across the table and took my hand. We're going to get through this, Elena. I promise. I believed him. For the first time in weeks, I truly believed that I was going to survive this. I was going to clear my name. I was going to get my daughter back. And I was going to make sure that Mark and Rachel paid for everything they had done to me. My mother posted my bail the next morning. I walked out of the courthouse into the pale winter sunlight, and I felt like I was breathing for the first time in days. She was waiting for me at the bottom of the steps, her arms crossed over her chest, her face a mixture of relief and barely suppressed anger. She had never been one to hide her feelings. Get in the car, she said, nodding toward her old sedan. We have a lot to talk about. I got in without argument. The car smelled like the lavender sachets she kept in the glove compartment and the faint hint of coffee from her morning thermos. It was such a familiar smell, such a familiar space, that I felt a lump form in my throat. She drove in silence for a few blocks before she spoke. What happened? Elena, what did you do? I didn't do anything, I said, my voice thin and tired. Mark set me up. He's been having an affair. He's been feeding information to the company to make it look like I was the one leaking secrets. He did this to get rid of me. My mother didn't flinch. She had always had a low opinion of Mark, and this was just confirmation of everything she had suspected. I always told you he was no good. But you never listened. I know, I said quietly. I know, and I'm sorry. But I need your help now. I need you to believe me. She glanced at me, her eyes softening just a fraction. I believe you. I don't know what happened, but I believe you. You're my daughter. I know who you are. I felt the tears start to fall. I had been holding them back for so long, trying to stay strong, trying to keep myself together. But now, sitting in my mother's car, I let myself cry. She reached over and squeezed my hand, and it was such a small gesture, but it meant everything. We drove to her house, a small 2-bedroom bungalow on the edge of town. It was the house I had grown up in, the house where I had learned to ride a bike, where I had studied for my exams, where I had dreamed of the life I was going to build. Now I was back, broken and defeated, and it felt like coming full circle. My mother made tea, and we sat in her living room, the same floral couch, the same lace curtains, the same clock ticking on the mantelpiece. She listened as I told her everything, the affair, the conspiracy, the evidence I had gathered, the arrest. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge. She just listened. When I was finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What about Emma? What does she know?" I shook my head. I don't know. Mark must have told her something. She was at the arraignment. She looked so confused. My mother stood up. I'll call her. I'll bring her here. You two need to talk. I wanted to argue, to tell her it was too soon, that I wasn't ready. But she was already on the phone, her voice firm and steady. She was the one who had always held our family together, and she was not going to let it fall apart now. Emma arrived an hour later. She walked through the door with her shoulders hunched, her eyes downcast. She looked so small, so vulnerable, that I felt a fresh wave of guilt wash over me. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, patting the seat beside me on the couch. She sat down, but she didn't look at me. She stared at her hands, twisting her fingers together. My mother quietly excused herself, leaving us alone. "Emma, I know this has been hard," I said. "I know you must be confused and scared. But I want you to know that I didn't do what they said I did. I'm innocent. I'm going to prove it." She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "Dad said you were stealing from your company. He said you were going to go to prison." I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp. He was already poisoning her against me, already telling her lies. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Your father is wrong," I said. "He's trying to protect himself, and he's lying to you to do it." I know it's hard to hear, but it's the truth. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing what I had said. Then she asked, "Is it true that he's having an affair?" I felt my heart break a little. She was so young, so innocent. She should never have to ask a question like that. But she deserved the truth. "Yes," I said. "He's been seeing someone else for a long time. And he's been trying to blame me for everything that's happened so that he can leave me without having to face the consequences." Emma's face crumpled. She started to cry, and I pulled her into a hug. She clung to me, her small body shaking with sobs. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry you have to go through this. But I promise you I'm going to fight. I'm going to make this right. And I'm never going to let anyone take me away from you again." We sat there for a long time, just holding each other. I didn't know if she believed me. I didn't know if she understood what I was telling her. But I had said it. I had told her the truth, and that was all I could do for now. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. Dennis was working tirelessly, filing motions, gathering evidence, preparing for the trial. I spent most of my time at my mother's house, trying to stay out of sight, trying to rebuild my life from the ground up. I had lost almost everything. My job was gone. My reputation was in tatters. My marriage was over. But I still had my mother. I still had Emma. And I still had the truth. Dennis called me one afternoon with news. I found something, he said. I subpoenaed Mark's cell phone records. He's been making calls to a number that matches the IP address of the emails sent from your account. He's been using a burner phone to communicate with the competitor. My heart leaped. Can you prove it? I can prove that the calls were made from his location at the exact times the emails were sent. It's not definitive proof, but it's enough to raise serious doubts about his involvement. I'm going to present this to the DA tomorrow. I felt a surge of hope. It was the first real breakthrough we had had. What about Rachel? Are you still working on her? Dennis sighed. Rachel is a tougher nut to crack. She's sticking to her story, and she's been very careful not to leave a paper trail. But I'm working on it. I'll find something. I hung up and sat in my mother's kitchen, staring at the wall. I was so close. I could feel it. But I was also exhausted, worn down by the constant fighting, the constant fear. That evening, my mother and I were having dinner when the doorbell rang. I went to answer it, and my stomach dropped. Mark was standing on the porch, his hands in his pockets, his face carefully composed. Elena, he said. We need to talk. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be anywhere near me. He held up his hands. I know. But I wanted to give you a chance to fix this before it goes too far. Fix this, I repeated, incredulous. You're the one who broke everything. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I know you have evidence against me. I know you've been working with Dennis. But I have a proposal. Drop the charges against me, and I'll drop the charges against you. We can both walk away from this and pretend it never happened. I stared at him, stunned. He was offering me a way out, a way to avoid the trial, to avoid the public humiliation. But it was also a way for him to escape accountability. He was trying to buy his freedom with my silence. You're offering me a deal, I said slowly. A fair deal, he said. You keep your freedom, and I keep mine. We both get what we want. I thought about it. I thought about Emma, about my mother, about the life I was trying to rebuild. I could take his deal and walk away. I could put this behind me and try to move on. But I knew deep down that I couldn't do it. He had taken so much from me. He had destroyed my career, my marriage, my reputation. He had tried to take my daughter. He had tried to take my freedom. And now he was offering me a deal, like I was the one who owed him something. No, I said. I'm not going to let you off the hook. You're going to face the consequences of what you did, Mark. I'm going to make sure of it. His face hardened. You're making a mistake. I've made a lot of mistakes, I said. Trusting you is the biggest one. But I'm not making a mistake now. He turned and walked away without another word. I watched him get into his car and drive off, and I felt a strange sense of peace. I had stood my ground. I had not let him intimidate me. I had taken the first real step toward reclaiming my life. When I went back inside, my mother was waiting in the hallway. What did he want? He wanted to make a deal, I said. I said no. My mother nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. Good. That's my girl. I went to bed that night feeling more hopeful than I had in weeks. The trial was still ahead of me, and I knew it was going to be brutal. But I was ready. I was ready to fight for my freedom, for my daughter, for my life. The next morning, Dennis called with more news. The DA is dropping the charges, he said. They found conclusive evidence that the emails were sent from Mark's device. They're going to arrest him today. I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. It was over. It was finally over. Thank you, I said, my voice trembling. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet, Dennis said. We still have a lot of work to do. But you're going to be okay, Elena. I promise. I hung up the phone and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was rising over the rooftops, casting a warm golden glow over everything. It was a new day, a new beginning. And I was ready to face it. The morning of the trial was cold and bright, the kind of winter day that made everything look sharp and clear. I stood in front of the mirror in my mother's spare bedroom, adjusting the collar of my navy blue suit. I had chosen it carefully. It was professional but not flashy, confident but not aggressive. I wanted the jury to see a woman who had been wronged, not a woman who was out for revenge. My mother knocked on the door and poked her head in. "Are you ready?" I took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." She walked over and straightened my collar, a gesture she had done 1,000 times when I was a child. "You're going to be fine. You're strong. You're smart. And you have the truth on your side." I hugged her, and for a moment, I felt like I was 10 years old again, seeking comfort in her arms. "Thank you. For everything." She pulled back and looked at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You don't have to thank me. You're my daughter. I'll always be here for you." The courthouse was already buzzing with activity when we arrived. Reporters lined the steps, their cameras flashing as I walked by. I kept my head high, my eyes straight ahead. I could hear them shouting questions, but I didn't stop. I didn't answer. Inside, the courtroom was packed. I saw Emma sitting in the front row next to my mother. She looked nervous, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I gave her a small smile, and she managed a weak one in return. Mark was already seated at the defense table, flanked by his lawyer, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit. He looked composed, confident, like he had everything under control. But I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed against the table. He was not as calm as he wanted everyone to believe. Rachel was seated in the gallery, her face carefully neutral. She had been subpoenaed to testify, and I could tell she was dreading it. She had been avoiding me for weeks, refusing to take my calls, refusing to meet with Dennis. But now she had no choice. She had to face me. The judge entered, and everyone rose. The trial began. The prosecution presented their case first. They called a series of witnesses who testified to the evidence against me: the emails, the financial records, the witness statements. It was damning, and I felt the weight of their words pressing down on me. But I had prepared for this. I had known what they were going to say. When it was my turn, I took the stand. I looked out at the jury, 12 faces that would decide my fate. They were ordinary people, just like me. They had families, jobs, lives. They were not looking to destroy me. They were just looking for the truth. I told my story. I told them about the Burnham account, about Rachel's accusations, about my sudden termination. I told them about Mark's affair, about his secret phone, about the texts I had found. I told them about the financial documents, about the threats, about the arrest. I told them everything. The prosecution tried to trip me up, tried to make me look like a liar, a manipulator. But I held my ground. I had the evidence. I had the truth. And I was not going to let them take that away from me. When I stepped down from the stand, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had done everything I could. Now it was up to the jury. The trial lasted 3 days. On the 3rd day, the jury went into deliberation. I sat in the hallway with my mother and Emma, waiting. The hours crawled by. I tried to read, but I couldn't focus. I tried to talk, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was sit and wait. Finally, the bailiff called us back into the courtroom. The jury had reached a verdict. I stood at the defense table, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked at Emma, and she reached out and squeezed my hand. The foreman stood and read the verdict. Not guilty. I felt the air leave my lungs in a rush. I had won. I had actually won. The courtroom erupted in noise. Reporters shouted questions. My mother was crying. Emma was hugging me. But I couldn't focus on any of it. All I could see was Mark's face, pale and stricken, as the judge ordered his immediate arrest. He had been charged with conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. His life was over, and he knew it. Rachel was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs. She had been charged with perjury and conspiracy. Her career was over. Her reputation was in tatters. She had sold her soul for a promotion, and now she had nothing. I walked out of the courthouse into the cold winter air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. I looked up at the sky, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It was over. It was finally over. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. The divorce was finalized quickly. Mark had agreed to a settlement in exchange for a reduced sentence. I got the house, the car, and sole custody of Emma. He got prison time and the bitter knowledge that he had lost everything. I moved back into the townhouse with Emma. It was strange being there without Mark. The rooms felt empty, hollow. but I was determined to fill them with new memories, better memories. I repainted the walls. I bought new furniture. I made the house my own. I also got my job back. The board had issued a formal apology, acknowledging that I had been wrongfully terminated. They offered me my old position, but I turned it down. I had spent 13 years building a career at that company, and I was proud of what I had accomplished. But I needed a fresh start. I needed to move on. I found a new job at a smaller firm, one that valued integrity and honesty. It wasn't as prestigious as my old job, but it was a good job, a solid job. I was happy there. I was building something new. Emma and I grew closer. We started having dinner together every night, just the two of us. We talked about school, about her friends, about her dreams. She was still healing, still processing everything that had happened. But she was strong, stronger than I had ever given her credit for. She was going to be okay. My mother was a constant presence in our lives. She came over for dinner every Sunday, and she and Emma developed their own rituals, baking cookies, watching old movies, going for walks in the park. It was a small thing, but it meant everything to me. I had come so close to losing my family, and now I was rebuilding it, brick by brick. One evening, about 6 months after the trial, I was sitting in the living room with Emma. She was doing her homework, and I was reading a book. It was quiet, peaceful. The kind of evening I had once taken for granted. "Mom," Emma said, looking up from her notebook. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you're here." I felt tears prick at my eyes. I reached over and took her hand. "I'm glad I'm here too. I'm never going to let anyone take me away from you again." She smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. In that moment, I knew that everything I had been through had been worth it. The pain, the fear, the betrayal, it had all led me here, to this moment, with my daughter, in our home, at peace. I had spent my previous life as a victim. I had let other people define my worth, my future, my happiness. I had let them take everything from me, and I had given up without a fight. But not this time. This time I had fought. I had won. And I had reclaimed my life. I looked around the room, at the photos on the wall, the books on the shelves, the cozy furniture. It was not a perfect life. There were still challenges, still struggles. But it was my life, and I was living it on my own terms. Emma went back to her homework, and I returned to my book. The clock ticked softly on the mantelpiece. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. It was an ordinary evening, the kind of evening that happens 1,000 times in a lifetime. But for me, it was extraordinary. It was a moment of peace, of healing, of hope. I thought about Mark, about Rachel, about all the people who had tried to destroy me. They were gone now, out of my life, out of my mind. I didn't hate them. I didn't wish them ill. I just didn't think about them anymore. They had been a chapter in my life, a dark and painful chapter. But the book was still being written, and I was the one holding the pen. I closed my book and stood up. "I'm going to make some tea," I said. "Do you want anything?" Emma looked up and smiled. "Hot chocolate coming right up." I walked into the kitchen and filled the kettle. Through the window, I could see the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. It was a clear night, cold and beautiful. I thought about all the nights I had spent staring out a window like this, feeling alone, feeling hopeless. But I wasn't alone anymore. I had my mother, my daughter, my home. I had everything I needed. The kettle whistled, and I poured the hot water into 2 mugs. I carried them back into the living room and handed one to Emma. She wrapped her hands around it, savoring the warmth. "Thanks, Mom," she said. "Anytime, sweetheart." I sat down beside her and took a sip of my tea. It was quiet and warm and perfect. In my previous life, I had never imagined I could be this happy. I had never imagined I could be this free. But I was. I was free. And that was the greatest victory of all. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after Mark was sentenced. I signed them in the kitchen while Emma was at school and my mother was at the grocery store. The pen moved across the page with a quiet scratch, and I felt nothing. No sadness, no relief, no anger. Just a calm sense of finality. I mailed the papers that afternoon and drove to the park near our house. The weather was finally warming up, the first hint of spring in the air. I walked along the path, past the pond where Emma used to feed the ducks, past the bench where I had once sat with Mark and talked about our future. It all seemed like a different life now, a life that belonged to someone else. I sat down on a bench near the playground and watched a group of children running and laughing. One of them was a little girl with dark hair and a pink coat, just like Emma had been at that age. I smiled, remembering those days. They had been hard days sometimes, full of sleepless nights and endless worry. But they had also been beautiful days, full of wonder and love. My phone buzzed. A text from Dennis. The judge approved the settlement. The house is yours. The car is yours. You're free. I typed back a quick thank you and put the phone away. Free. It was such a simple word, but it carried so much weight. I had been trapped for so long, trapped by my marriage, trapped by my job, trapped by my own fears and insecurities. But now the chains were gone. I stayed at the park until the sun started to set. Then I drove home. My mother was in the kitchen, cooking dinner. Emma was at the table, doing her homework. The smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the air. It was warm and familiar and safe. Mom, you're back, Emma said, looking up with a smile. I'm back, I said, hanging up my coat. What's for dinner? Grandma's famous spaghetti, Emma said. I walked over to the stove and looked at the simmering pot. Smells amazing. My mother handed me a wooden spoon. Taste it. Tell me if it needs more salt. I took a sip and closed my eyes. It was perfect. Just like everything else in my life right now. We ate dinner together, the three of us, talking and laughing. Emma told us about her day at school. My mother told us about her neighbor's new cat. I told them about the settlement, about the house, about the future. It was an ordinary dinner, the kind of dinner that happens 1,000 times in a lifetime. But for me, it was extraordinary. Later that night, I tucked Emma into bed. She was tired, her eyes already half closed. I sat beside her and brushed the hair from her forehead. I love you, Mom, she whispered. I love you too, sweetheart, I said. More than anything. She drifted off to sleep, and I sat there for a long time, just watching her. She was so peaceful, so safe. I had almost lost her, but I had fought for her, and I had won. That was the greatest victory of all. I walked back to my own room and sat on the edge of the bed. The house was quiet, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a car passing by. I looked around the room, at the photos on the wall, the books on the shelf, the empty space where Mark's things used to be. I was alone. But I was not lonely. I had my mother. I had my daughter. I had myself. And that was enough. I turned off the light and lay down in the dark. Outside, the stars were shining through the window. I looked at them for a long time, thinking about everything I had been through, everything I had survived. I had been broken, but I had put myself back together. I had been lost, but I had found my way home. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds singing. The sun was pouring through the window, warm and golden. I stretched and smiled. It was a new day, a new beginning. And I was ready for it.